I don't want to speak poorly about NFTs. But what I will say is there's not much product and there's not much ARR that exists in NFTs. It is really quite a sad industry, and it's tough to build it.
I knew that the three of you were fairly Bitcoin focused. I guess I didn't realize to such a degree. I love it. A good place to start the conversation.
People are very bullish right now. There's huge liquidity coming in.
I mean, I just kind of laugh at the idea of like putting most of these things into like predictive models. This is an emerging asset class. This is something that's only 15 years old. It's already exceeded everybody's expectations and blown through just about every model that's existed so far.
Even the most experienced traders understand that too. Like that's kind of how it is in crypto. Like you can be bullish and then the next day you can be bearish. It kind of depends on what your time reference is.
Everyone's got something to say about this space. How do you discern from all that noise? How do you discern signal? How do you find quality?
They should have their face and their name on it, their company, and they should lead with like a responsible and reasonable ethos. If the person has an anonymous profile picture of some, I don't even know, some NFT of some sorts, okay, you should be reconsidering your investment advice.
Whoa. You're knocking on my roots, brother.
Hello and welcome to the Andy and Friends podcast. I'm your friend Andy, and on this episode of the podcast, I have the Wolf Financial Web3 team, Charles, Cade, and Gabriel. They talk to hundreds of people every single week, spanning 20 to 40 plus X spaces on topics all around Web3 and crypto. We go in depth into what they see in Bitcoin, what all the experts they talk to see, where we're at in this cycle, and how you can cut through all the noise and find the voices in crypto that are actually worth listening to, plus a bunch more. Lots of really interesting insights in this one, so let's jump in. And here we are on the podcast, but it's not just me. I'm here with three other people, some friends who I've actually met in person now at the Bitcoin 2024 conference from Wolf Web3. Wolf Financial, the Web3 division of Wolf Financial. But I connected with these guys through Twitter Spaces. We do all kinds of, I've been on Bitcoin mining spaces and DePIN spaces and you name it. And these guys have a very unique perspective in that they've chatted with hundreds, thousands of people, I don't know. And they have their own opinions, but they also have all the opinions of everyone else. So it's like having all the influencers and KOLs and experts around the world packaged into just three humans, which is incredible. Yeah, so hello to the three of you. Welcome to the podcast. Good to see you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
So let's start I'll go in order here, just what I see on screen. But if you could maybe do a quick intro of who you are and how you plug into the Wolf Financial world. And then maybe also I'd love to know like how you got your start in crypto / Bitcoin. And Gabriel, we'll start with you.
Awesome. Yeah. So I do operations for the Wolf Web3 subsidiary of Wolf Financial. And I got into crypto Bitcoin through a college club that I was involved in back in sophomore year of college. And then I found these guys by just being on Twitter, just tweeting at them, learned about spaces through them, and then began working with them. Personally, I am a Bitcoin first kind of guy. I understand the ethos of Bitcoin and what it's designed to solve. And so I mainly speak and talk about that. I enjoy connecting with people who also share that same vision. So yeah.
Love it.
He also loves Cardano.
He loves Cardano as well. And also Cardano.
Maybe make a note of that, an extra note of that. Yeah, we'll just sit on this Cardano note for a hot second here. No, I'm Cade. I'm the main host and voice behind the Wolf Web3 account. So any Wolf Web3 space, for the most part, I'm the voice behind that one. And so doing spaces every single day, all day. It's been a pretty crazy change of lifestyle, basically, from the beginning of the year before I joined Wolf Web3, which I joined like February of 2024 or so. I've just been doing video content in the crypto world for years now. I think full-time since 2021. So been doing that for a long time. I didn't know about the spaces world as in-depth as it is now that I'm aware of the spaces world and the entire industry that is spaces. So it's been a wild time for me. I got into crypto around 2020 when I was working as a restaurant after I graduated college and realized my degree was kind of useless. Even though it was a good degree, it wasn't getting me anywhere. I needed to make money, but I was in this job that wasn't really going to progress me up. And I was like, crap, I got to figure out finance. So I dove in and then I fell into the crypto bull run and I just started making content from there. And so It's been a wild run, but I'm also Bitcoin first now. I was not Bitcoin first for a long time, but it's these spaces literally are Bitcoin space, and being around Charles and Gabriel that pushed me into being orange pilled each and every week. And then one day it's something clicked, and I was like, dude, I think this is the only one that I could ever shill to like a politician. And I need to think about why that is. This is a hard sell for a lot of things, but Bitcoin makes sense.
I know. I started trying to sell my mom on Bitcoin. I realized at that point, I was like, I think I'm in. I think I'm in the gang at this point. I was trying to get her to understand that Bitcoin or money is a representation of effort, and Bitcoin is the best representation of effort if you take a timeline and you make it, max 50 years. And that was not translating. But anyway, what's up? I'm Charles. Yeah, I do operations at Wolf. So anything, when I came on, we were just Wolf Financial. And we scaled from Wolf Financial to Wolf Web3. I came on at like 220,000 followers on Wolf Financial. We're now at 340,000. We gained like 120,000 in a year, which is pretty crazy for numbers. Then we launched Wolf Web3, Wolf News, Wolf Sports, and just started going verticals with spaces because live content was kind of our thing. After that, I got into crypto in kind of an interesting way. I actually had like a tech background. I was good with building computers. And so I was like, oh man, I should mine Ethereum. I'm great with computers. And so I started buying all the GPUs. And this was during the craze, like when we were waiting all night through outside Micro Center and outside Best Buy and we were camping. I don't know if you guys got on this train, but I was absolutely on this train. And I would go at like 8 p.m. and I'd sit out there. The guy next to me was like a sweaty, devastated mess. He's like, you one of those miners? He's like, I'm just trying to upgrade my computer. No, I'm serious. They were angry with you because they're like, who are you? Like, we see you in the news and we don't like you. So anyway, I did that. EIP 1559 comes out. They cut proof of work. They go proof of stake. I exit. Ethereum's at like 4,400, 4,200. And I was like, well, probably better to sell my stuff now. I sell all of it, get out of it completely. I go right into NFTs because I was like, this is the move. Got totally disenfranchised because NFTs is I don't want to speak poorly about NFTs. But what I will say is there's not much product and there's not much ARR that exists in NFTs. It is really quite a sad industry and it's tough to build in. So I left, got disillusioned. And then when I found Wolf, I came back. And to be honest, I thought I was just crypto. And the more that you get into the conversation, somehow you become Bitcoin. And I never really meant to, but when I deeply understood the nonce and probability and what's going on with all the math and the physics behind Bitcoin, you really become a believer in comparison to proof of stake and other protocols that are using other consensus mechanisms because they're just not as tried and true. And the truth is those mechanisms they're subject to subpoenas and they're subject to central authorities, and Bitcoin is not. So go Bitcoin. That's my intro.
Like okay. So yeah, I knew that the three of you were fairly Bitcoin focused. I guess I didn't realize to such a degree. I love it. A good place to start the conversation. And maybe I want to talk about that portion of it a little bit. But first, before I jump into that part of the conversation, that would be really interesting. Again, Wolf Financial, Twitter Spaces, like 40 or 50 of these things every single week. Hundreds of people a week being talked to.
Can I give some numbers?
Yes, give me the numbes. Impress me. And if you don't impress me, we're going to cut it out.
Okay, prepare to be
Come
impressed.
on, Charles.
No. So we've hosted 40 hours of spaces a week for the past 3 years on Wolf Financial. We do about 500,000 live listeners on any given month, and those are unique listeners that are coming through the spaces. On Wolf Web3, we host about 25 to 35 hours a week. So total, we're at 70 to 80 hours of live events every single week. Usually we have roughly about, 550,000 unique listeners, maybe even 600,000 unique listeners across every channel on every given month. So from perspective wise, that's kind of the totality of what we got going on.
Yeah, that is, it's pretty crazy. My mind is always blown when I realize just how much content goes through the Wolf Financial ecosystem. And yeah, if you want to spend one or two of those weekly hours with the Wolf team and Andy, I'm usually in there once a week. So, shout out to the spaces that you guys have me join. I always have a good time. So tons of spaces, tons of hours, tons of people. lots of opinions, lots of expertise, lots of like years of experience in this industry. Listening to everybody, what's the general sentiment of crypto right now? What's the outlook, the crypto world right now? And maybe we'll start with you, Gabriel.
Yeah, I would say this wouldn't surprise anyone just based on the cycles that people talk about, but people are very bullish right now. Obviously, there's huge liquidity coming in. The miners have cut their the subsidy down, and it seems that there's now a huge competition amongst them to stay in business. After those miners start capitulating, everyone knows that that's when things start to get going from a Bitcoin price perspective. And the
Like when
consensus,
they run out of reserves to sell.
I think the idea is once all the weak competition is out, then it's just the strong miners, and they start to set the prices of the fee markets and such, and then
Okay.
the bull market starts. There's huge debate. Here's something that's really interesting. Huge debate right now over the power law model as to whether or not that should be discussed or talked about. There was, it's interesting because for this cycle it's the power law. For the previous cycle, it was the stock to flow model. And, whatever you think about it, I don't think it's appropriate to use quantitative models to describe something that's qualitative. So I think that's a pretty interesting discussion that we've had. But yeah, I would say no matter whether you believe in the models or not, everyone thinks there's the bull market coming. So that's the sentiment, I'd say.
Yeah, before we get into the rest of the sentiment talk, I am curious. My own personal opinion is I mean, I just kind of laugh at the idea of like putting most of these things into like predictive models. This is an emerging asset class. This is something that's only 15 years old. It's already exceeded everybody's expectations and blown through just about every model that's existed so far.
Yeah.
So when we, try to wrap it in this pretty bow and go, here's what it's going to do over the next couple of years, I'm like, one, do we need this? Is it, but two, I get it. Like it's content and people can, make their rise to fame and stuff on it. So I'm curious, anybody have any strong thoughts other than what Gabriel just shared about that?
So Gabriel's one, you look like you're in an Atari game. Two, he's typically over my head. So I think, to be honest, like power law and some of the stuff he's going over as far as minor fees and details, like we bring Gabriel in a lot of times for the research when we do live interviews. He's way over my head as far as the details and like minutia and granular sentiment as it pertains to any given issue. So most of that is over my head. What I will say is I do think predictive models are always subject to humanity, which is unpredictable at its core. Wars start out of nowhere, and so it's very tough to put prediction in a model. Now, I will say prediction gets more and more accurate as the data set gets longer. And you can ask any machine learning guy this. Like you have to take out individual isolated incidents and increase your timeline, and your data set starts to get very accurate. But it's hard to do. World War III, we're 70 years out from our last World War. How long until our next one? Everybody has nukes. I don't know. Is it another 50 years? Do we have another 50 years? So I'm not sure. And if that happens, obviously everything is correlated to whether a world war starts, and that's tough to predict. So anyway.
Yeah. Cade, any thoughts on this?
I have some thoughts. I've definitely taken more of a back seat. Let me learn about this world a bit more the last few months, especially in the Bitcoin conversation. But as far as general sentiment that I'm hearing along the lines are the power law conversation is definitely a topic of contention. The other question with Bitcoin is just where we're at on a political level and a government legislation level. Like we're seeing Dennis Porter and Caitlin Long out here fighting on the front lines. We're able to get them in some spaces every now and then and get some updates and stuff. But that's been, at least from my end of the timeline, it's different for everybody, as I imagine, on how much Bitcoin interaction they're getting on Twitter timeline. But I'm seeing a lot of those kind of announcements, and then people's just generals back and forths on whether or not it's going to be an election year, just massive super cycle bull run or not. But I have not heard the sentiment of super cycle as often as I heard last run, which gives me the feeling that we've got a whole lot more upside before like any. I mean, I'm sure we could have another long lull, but I feel like we've been choppy for months now. I've been out of the market for a while, since basically the beginning of the summer. I'm starting to get itchy, and so I know other people are starting to get itchy, and I'm starting to be like, all right, what are the plays, bro? What are the plays? Like all I do is sit in trading spaces all week, so I'm just like feeling the FOMO a little bit. But
yeah, so I think Andy, you had tweeted about like a meme of someone being like, all right, me and the boys buying at 50K every time it goes down there. We're holding the line. And I think that I was like, I did that. I was buying at 50K. I know like so many people were buying at 50K. And it's one of those interesting things where you think about psychology. It's like, well, if it goes below 50, psychologically people will be like, oh no, this is either bad or it's a good buying opportunity. And in the recent, liquidity crisis with the yen carry trade,
Conviction.
seems like we were all like, oh, this is a really good opportunity. So I just want to let you know I was participating and holding the line there. So
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I like to always, make a $5 buy or something and say, I did my part, I bought up this
A
dip.
$5 buy.
yeah,
I helped. It's coming back up now. You're welcome. You can
Yeah.
thank me later.
moving the market.
So, Cade, wait. So, back to what you just said. Does that mean you have no money in crypto right now? You're on the sideline waiting to
Ooh.
get back in?
So I was up until what was it called? What was the last conference we were just at? Bitcoin Nashville. So when I was there, I did an interview with Pio from the Nifty Portal, the Bodogo's team, and got great respect for them. They were actually the main reason I joined Wolf, because I saw what they were able to accomplish with a team of people who actually work hard and are willing to grind and put day in and day out. And I was like, okay, I'd be down to work on a team if that was the setting. And I just hadn't seen that. I hadn't experienced that yet. And so they were at the conference. They were like, yo, you want to jump in for a quick interview? I was like, yeah, sure. Talked to Pio, and he asked something about like, where will you buy Bitcoin, on what exchange or something like that. And at some point in the interview, I just it clicked, and I was like, dude, I think I need to buy some, so that I can really truly feel this. Like, I'm bought in now mentally with Bitcoin, but I think I need to throw some money in here, even though we're at a point where I feel like we could have a drawback down to the 40Ks. And I was nervous about that, but I was like, wait, but it doesn't matter because of where I'm at mentally now with Bitcoin. Like, I don't have to attack it like an altcoin swing trade anymore. And so I actually did enter the market. My average buy-in with Bitcoin right now is 58K. I was able to bring it down a little bit. I've bought the last few dips. And so I was grateful for that. But I am in the market now, not a ton, but I would say maybe, I don't know about exact numbers, but like under $10,000 into the market right now. Mainly Bitcoin, a little bit of Roth IRA, SPY, like some bigger long-term plays. I'm really nervous to get back into the altcoins, completely honest. But I am into Bitcoin a little bit, but nothing heavy.
So if I don't know if you've done the actual calculation, but I'm curious with the three of y'all, what percentage of your net worth is crypto?
Probably 5% me, maybe.
Not 95%.
I'm mostly cash. I'm almost entirely cash liquid right now. So
I
I'm
literally
okay.
hold every dollar I have goes into Bitcoin right away.
I'm 85% plus.
Wow.
Yeah, I keep just enough for living expenses outside of Bitcoin. Everything else, every dollar goes into BTC.
Y'all are crazy.
Yeah, 85% plus. People think that is crazy.
That
yeah.
is crazy.
Is that?
That is crazy.
Dude, Bitcoin's the asset.
No, it is, but that's still crazy.
It's normal. For me, it's normal. Once you understand, you can't go back. You just can't.
Dude, you try to tell a traditional financial analyst what I just said, he'd be like, you may be the dumbest guy I've ever met in my entire life. Because it's
Yes, this is my
non-diversity.
experience.
Really?
Yep.
What was your experience like?
Well, I mean, I have house and real estate and stuff included in mine, but of my actual my crypto portfolio is 70% of my entire net worth. But if I remove some of that stuff and I just talk about brokerage accounts or my crypto portfolio, then it is 90% or something like that.
Whoa.
So I'm crazy.
Nice.
I'm the only crazy person on the panel then, with such a small
Well,
percentage.
You may be the only sane person. We're not sure.
Yeah.
Is it mostly Bitcoin or
It's
what do
all,
you
the
what are you
only
holding?
crypto I own is Bitcoin.
No,
Currently.
I was thinking Andy.
So my crypto portfolio, which makes up of my entire net worth 70%, 50% of that is Bitcoin.
50.
Oh wow, am I crazy? Am I holding too much Bitcoin?
So it depends on what your strategy is. I think I would share this with you guys in that when I look at a long-term landscape, 1 decade, 2 decades from now, Bitcoin is the only thing that makes sense to me. That's the only thing that I think is going to be here for sure of the entire crypto world between now and the next 20 years. However, I also don't believe that the only single application of blockchain in the entire known universe is just Bitcoin. I don't buy into that.
What did he say? No, I'm joking.
But everything else is such a speculative gamble that I don't want to make huge bets for long term. However, I make short-term bets for a single cycle, and then I will cash out of all those alts, and I will buy myself way more Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So I use most stuff as a means to an end to get more Bitcoin, even though some of the other things I think may survive. We don't know. It's just too nebulous. Bitcoin is the only sure thing. Do any of you play with that kind of strategy?
I have. Yeah. Go on, Charles.
I think I was just going to say, we have a lot of conversations, and a lot of the African and non-first world countries, like they can't wrap their head around Bitcoin, because for them, they're thinking like 5x, 10x, like they're looking at crypto as wealth creation, not wealth retention. And to me, Bitcoin is wealth retention. Like I'm not really trying to, like, if it goes up 20, 30%, like that's cool, but I didn't really plan for that. But with altcoins and all this stuff, so as you start to go into these other countries, I will say, like, I was doing an interview with a lady, and she does Bitcoin adoption for African nations. And she goes, a lot of times those people never pass down money or assets to their next of kin. She goes, so they're not, if you go to them and be like, let me get you a savings account. She's like, they're not thinking like that. Like they're day to day, like, let me get enough money for the next week. So she goes, when you talk about Bitcoin, which is like 40-year, 50, 60-year timelines, there's no touch point. They're like, wait, what are you talking about? It's like, no, you could pass down your assets and your goods to your kids' kids. And that's a foreign concept for third world nations. They've never had that idea of passing wealth down generationally. And so I say this to say, Bitcoin for me, like I talked to a guy named Zachary Townsend. He founded Meanwhile, thank you so much. He founded Meanwhile, which is Bitcoin life insurance. And he goes, think about it like this. Life insurance is a policy that you're supposed to have open for 25, 30, 40 years, but you're going to open it up in an asset that's inflating at extreme prices and hoping that the policy that you open will be just as valuable when you get to that day that you pass away and your family can retain that value. He said it's a complete juxtaposition in what is proper framing for what you're thinking a 40-year timeline for wealth retention. He goes, but what's perfect for that? Bitcoin. He goes, you're not dealing with inflation. You're not losing the ability to store the capital of your effort and energy over periods of time. So I say this all to say, Bitcoin for me is wealth retention, not creation.
Yeah. Gabriel, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, back to your point about owning Bitcoin versus other assets. So I do own 2 other cryptocurrencies, but they're like marginally very small relative to my Bitcoin position. And the one is BitTensor, and then the other is Caspa. And so I kind of, when I was just here, I want to actually ask you a question, Andy, once I get done like introing this, because like I think you and I have spoken a lot about Caspa, and I think we kind of understand it just on Spaces and otherwise. But when I got into BitTensor, I was like, wow, this is a really cool idea for AI. I had seen this idea propagated in smaller concepts. Like there was one called Numerai.ai, and it was like this hedge fund that they built off of a decentralized computer system. So I saw that on Lex Friedman's podcast a few years ago, and I was like, it's really cool. And then BitTensor comes out, and in my opinion, it's just a more generalized version of this. So it was all over Twitter, pumping, whatever. It was at like $50, and I was like, oh man, that looks pretty cool. And then it like doubled, and I was like, okay, I got to buy this. And so I bought it, and then it just took off, and it was into the hundreds of dollars. So that was a good bet. But, and then Cas was a different story. We can get into that. But my question to you, Andy, is if you have so much of your money in alternative tokens and such, like even though I own BitTensor and it did well, I just wonder, how is the ownership in those tokens accretive to me as the network improves and grows, right? Versus Bitcoin, I understand the whole purpose is being money. When it's BitTensor, the whole purpose is like some AI company. Is it an operating company? Is it a currency? So I don't know how you rationalize.
This is interesting. This is a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the great fundamental problems in the world of non-Bitcoin things is what gives the token value over time, and how can you solve the problem of where basically everything that is not Bitcoin just loses value relative to Bitcoin, especially in Bitcoin terms when you price it in sats. So I don't personally think that problem has been truly solved yet. I would view most cryptos out there, most altcoins, as things that should just be a company, and they happen to have a token because that's what you do in the crypto space. And they try to assign utility or value or purpose to it after the fact. Now, there are some that are fringe cases and stuff, but I think that's still the great experiment. What's going to happen with that? I want these things for just a short-term cycle. I want to watch them go to their heights, play some narratives, find some some smart plays, and then roll it over into Bitcoin. And so far, that's worked out swimmingly for me because I have way more Bitcoin now than I did or that I would have had if I'd only bought into Bitcoin. And which I would echo, which has already been said a little bit here. I'm a believer that Bitcoin will not make you rich. I mean, if you bought in 15 years ago, sure. But like now, it's savings technology. It's not wealth creation technology unless you're putting just huge amounts of money into it. So in my mind, I'm looking for other things that can give me some kind of an asymmetric bet where, if I put 1% of my portfolio into it and it goes to zero, who the fuck cares? Like I got 99% of my value left over. So I make a bunch of those bets. I expect 9 out of 10 of them to go to zero. I want my 1 or 2 unicorns. I take the profits on the unicorns, put them into Bitcoin, and I keep on trucking happy into the future.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even something about leveraging though, like if you're saying Bitcoin's I agree, savings technology, but you look at a stock like MicroStrategy and what they're doing, and then you could even buy options on that kind of a stock. And so that's a crazy bet in my opinion. Just like you get like 1.3x leverage over 2 years on an options call, and it's also accretive when they buy and do their operations and such. So yeah, that's another place I think.
And as soon as we have ETFs that you can buy and sell options on, that's going to be a very interesting, opportunity to explore, because options trade, especially if you're only selling, where you play the house, you are the casino, that you reduce that risk overhead considerably, especially if you play really conservative plays. That can be a great way to earn kind of essentially passive income on your, it's ETF, so it's not actually your Bitcoin, but on your Bitcoin holdings over time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's shift here a second. Cade, I want to throw this one to you to start. Again, you guys talk to hundreds of people, like probably in a given week. Cade, you host a ton of these shows, or most of them, and like, I'm sure you're going to have a good slice of the market where you have a bunch of kind of OGs or people who've been in this space for years now. And then you have a bunch of people who've, this is their first true cycle. They've never been in a Bitcoin or a crypto bull run yet. And I just want to know, are they saying the same things, or what is the difference in the things that these people are saying generally when speaking about maybe the next year or Bitcoin and crypto in general? I just wonder if there's any interesting observations that we can kind of learn from in that dichotomy.
Well, I'll say this: the very beginning of the summer, like many months ago, they were all the traders, bro. I've brought these receipts up probably like 6 times in the last 2 months about me being right. But at the very beginning of the summer, they were like, Bitcoin cannot go lower. 69K is the bottom. It will not go lower. And these were OGs. These were very, very experienced traders. And I was like, look, I get it, but we're going to 44K, and that's when I'm going to buy in heavy. And I just like had this conviction. I was like, it's not worth the upside right now and they were mainly talking about getting in altcoins and running these altcoin plays. I'm like, look, there might be 30% plays here, 30, 40%, you can maybe make it 2X, but I just don't see it being more likely that you'll get that than you crashing down 90% if Bitcoin tumbles. And then we kind of just did nothing for a while. And then I started to feel the momentum starts to be like, like Bitcoin's getting like a little choppy. Like, I don't know, like we're 65K now. And I was just sitting there like smirking with my phone, like on mute, on my phone. I was like, dude, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And then because I've been wanting to get in at a lower price, I just didn't see the upside. So I was seeing a lot more bullish sentiment. And now we're pretty much flipped opposite. Now everyone after the summer is like, yeah, we're going to be bearish for a little bit. And then maybe end of year election season, we run up. So it is pretty interesting. I will say it's difficult to track because I'm in so many spaces and they start to blend together. So sometimes I can't remember, what the sentiment was 3 weeks ago versus 3 months ago. Cause I'm like, was that 3 months ago? All I know is I was right at the beginning of the summer, and I finally got my kudos from Price. And, I asked Price and he was like, all right, bro, you were right. Like, we'll give you this one time. And so I will say though, it changes. It changes on the week. Even the most experienced traders understand that too. Like, that's kind of how it is in crypto. Like, you can be bullish and then the next day you can be bearish. It kind of depends on what your time reference is. Some people are day traders. We've got some people who are in and out of positions in 3-4 minutes, 20, 30 minutes on some days, like super, super quick trades. And then a lot of people are long-term hodlers too. So there's always a bit of an out when you're a long-term hodler, because you can always play that like, well, we're dipping, so I'm buying the dip, like no problem. You kind of just switch it on. But yeah, dude, I don't know. There's a whole lot of opinions and they change a lot. That's what I'll say. Even the best traders.
And before I get either Charles or Gabriel's thoughts on this too, one kind of follow up here, maybe they can also add some color to this too. But you think about someone who's been in the space for a long time, and I'm sure there is certainly lessons learned. There's experience. There's expertise. These are all real things. These can have provable value to them. But at the end of the day, like to use the phrase that everyone uses, we don't know what the future is. We can't predict the future. No one actually knows. So we're just leaning on what our best understanding is. So when you zoom out and you see all these people, new or old, is it, do people who've been in the space actually kind of direct you in the right direction? Or are they just as wrong or just as right as the new people in the space? Like,
I say this is like the main thing I've noticed. I watch a lot of Benjamin Cohen. I really like his takes on the market. I feel like he's very realistic. We were able to meet up with him at the Nashville conference, which was cool. And we were able to meet up at the rooftop party too for a little bit. And the one thing I will take from experienced traders who have been in the market for multiple cycles now is they're not against a massive 40% correction in the middle of a bull run. It doesn't mean we're totally wrecked for forever. Like it could be a 2021 lull in the market like we had. And that's totally fine. And so I think that part of the market is saying, yeah, we could trend down for a few months while also being in the middle of a bull market, and you could just be picking up during this whole time. I think when you don't have the experience in the market of having experienced your 90% of your liquid net worth go straight to zero overnight, essentially, like I had in 2021 and many others had, and you're like, oh wow, that can flip at the literally in like 10 seconds. And then if I had just held though during that time and just held through the summer, I would have been able to get my bags right back if I had just been a little bit more patient with this. So it really helped me out as far as stacking Bitcoin and just not really worrying so much about the swings and volatility. So I would say that's probably the number one thing when I'm able to speak with more experienced traders versus people in the beginning. To be honest, not many of the people who are entering this for their first time in the market are hopping on many trading spaces yet. I think most of them are learning and are maybe in some of these spaces and some of these groups.
Even the audience.
But yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, only thing.
Charles, Gabriel.
Yeah, the only addendum I'd say, and maybe I can try to give an interesting take here. So, we started getting approached by Bitcoin layer 2 companies to market to our Bitcoin space. And we were like, hey, we think we're probably going to get a little blowback to market Bitcoin layer 2s to Bitcoin people. And they were like, well, we'd love to be able to market to them. And I was like, okay, well, what's your plan to market to, traditional Bitcoiners, and what's the ideology? And we asked, I'll leave all the companies nameless, but what was interesting is going to those companies, I was like, okay, well, what's your plan on onboarding Bitcoiners? And they were like, well, we don't need to onboard Bitcoiners because we just want to market to them, but we don't really have an interest in creating nomenclature or rhetoric that's surrounded around onboarding them because they have like old and archaic ideology. This is happening from like one single person, in a layer 2 space. But what I will say that is interesting. I think there's too much tribalism for somebody to have a proper perspective. And a lot of times, whenever you become an extremist on an issue, your ability to correlate the details and create analytical approaches that are highly reasonable according to large data sets and understandings can become really hurt by a person's ability to intake knowledge and be open-minded about other perspectives. And what I will say is Bitcoin is the most tribal. Like the idea of them, like what's interesting, we had a conversation with somebody and they'll all remain nameless. And they told me, and this was interesting, they were like, we believe everything else besides Bitcoin, except for a few rare cases, is a scam. And what was interesting is I was like, okay, well, what if the moral standing of the person believes that they're doing the right thing? And they're like, it doesn't matter. It's the technology that they put forth, whether it makes it a scam or not their moral standing. And I was like, man, that's a tough approach. Like you actually literally don't care about how they could be the most altruistic. I'm using blockchain to help feed, kids in third world countries. And they may be doing that, but to you, it's a scam. because the technology does not line up with the original like thesis of what Bitcoin was overall. And I think that that type of tribalism will not actually help propel anything. And while I will say Bitcoin, from a strictly analytical and detailed approach on understanding the protocol, the probability, the physics that goes into it, and I will say I went to the Bitcoin conference hoping that people could hang with me on the conversation. And once you start to get into concatenation and probability and 2 to the 23rd power and how the nonce works very specifically, most people do not know. They understand Bitcoin in an ideal perspective, but not in a specific perspective. They like the idea of trustless, but they don't know why it's trustless.
Yeah.
They like the idea of physics backing it, but they don't know how it's backed. And so anyway, I say that all to say, I think the next step for this ecosystem overall, because blockchain will go into other ecosystems, it will, and it'll do a good thing. And I have seen companies do good things, but I think most of the time right now, companies that are using blockchain and crypto are phrasing themselves as a crypto company because they don't know where their product market fit is, which is the tough part. Like, you're using the technology to say who you are as a company. You know what I mean? We're a Toyota. You know, we're an engine company. We have engines inside. It's like, well, you don't use the technology to describe your outcomes. And so I think, overall, we're young. We're trying to find out what we want to do. And I will say, for guiding lights, people are too parabolic to give you a really good resource on what exactly you should feel about certain issues because they're so tribal.
Yeah. No, I'll take off from that point. What I will say is, back to your original question, Andy, in terms of, how does the old crowd versus the new crowd, and how does the new crowd figure out what to invest in? Is the old crowd, do they know what they're talking about, or are they just saying things? And I think that the best way anybody, whether you're new or old, should be analyzing this is to look at the traditional markets. And so we've been starting to put out, as a team, Wolf Web3, we've been starting to put out some shorter style tweets that we just tweet out, trying to be more like inquisitive with those tweets to like spur on conversation. And one of them was, study the old school investors, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham, or all these guys, and figure out what about them, what did they do, and what did they see in the markets that gave them an advantage? Because everyone knows that if you do Warren Buffett's indicator right now, which is like Warren Buffett's historic indicators, the Wilshire 5000 divided by the GDP, debt to GDP. And if you go by that, it's totally out of whack, actually. In like the last 5-10 years, it's totally messed up because we've just been in so much debt and the stock market's growing and then it's not growing. So if you try and analyze the world the way they saw it, it's not going to work anymore. So you have to figure out what is new, what's coming, and then how can I apply their mindset to it. So like, for example, I think the main takeaway from what I'm saying is quality over quantity when it comes to information. So you should be seeing and absorbing as much information as you can, but then when you see something cool, you should hone in on it. And so for me, for example, with Bitcoin, there's a VC that I really like. His name's Chamath Palapamathi, and he runs the All In podcast. And he doesn't cover Bitcoin exclusively or anything like that, but they came out with a chart that was just amazing in terms of what it was telling about, in terms of where Bitcoin's price had been the last 3 cycles and where we should expect it. It's a simple chart, but the way that they put out the information was like, oh, wow, this is really useful. And it seems that even today, we're in those same trends, right? Like, we're not too high, we're not too low. We're at about what's expected. In the next few months, we might see a price appreciation, we might not, but it's all to kind of be expected. So someone's getting into it, getting new. I always tell everybody to study Bitcoin, because if you understand Bitcoin, you likely wouldn't allocate a lot to other chains unless you could figure out how they're accretive to you, which I haven't been able to figure out. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think study Bitcoin is great starter advice, because even if you're somebody who's coming into the space and you're like, Bitcoin's old, we got better stuff now. Why would I even study that? I need to study this new stuff. I mean, even if you have that mindset, which that's dumb, but if you had that mindset and you just weren't a believer in Bitcoin for whatever crazy reason, at least know your history, like know what this entire industry is basically built on the back of, and that will give you a greater understanding for all the technologies that have been built since then. But you just brought up a few interesting points I'd like to dive into, Gabriel. So you guys talk to a million different people. We hop on YouTube, we hop on Twitter, we're assaulted with name after name, expert after expert, opinion after opinion, right? Everyone's got something to say about this space. How do you discern from all that all that noise, how do you discern signal? How do you find quality? What are the check boxes that you look for to decide, okay, this person is actually worth listening to?
Yeah.
Whoever wants to take this one.
I'll start and just say, personally, they should have their face and their name on it, their company, and they should lead with like a responsible and reasonable ethos. They should be, you should be able to, at the very least, it should be that. If the person has an anonymous profile picture of some, I don't even know, some NFT of some sorts, okay, you should be reconsidering your investment advice.
Whoa. You're knocking on my roots, brother.
Oh, you have your face on yours. I'm just saying. But, and then I would really study, like I said, the traditional financial system and see how they conduct themselves and see if you can find patterns within the Bitcoin industries. And, like Michael Saylor is obviously someone who should be like high level in terms of what he has done and what he's doing. But yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts.
At some point, you said, use the word reasonable.
Yeah.
Reason and being reasonable and being level-headed in the space is something I value highly. But you're not sensational if you do that, so you don't get the clicks or whatever. But at some point we threw like that out the door and we just gravitate towards the crazy and the extreme. And I would love it if people would listen to that advice you just gave and gravitate towards those people who have an outlook, ethos, some kind of view into the space that is based in reason and that is well thought out and calculated versus whatever emotional like wild take you want to jump on this week or that just for the sake of it. Charles, Cade, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll take it from a different perspective because reasonable is, of course. I'll take this from the perspective. I think
you say reasonable is boring, so I'm going to go the other way.
Well, I was going to, I don't want to say that. So no, that's exactly right. But what I will say is this, and I think this is probably an interesting take. If you're listening to somebody and you don't have a background on them, the more that they're leaning you to faster action, there's probably an opportunity for them to be maligned in their incentives between selfishness and you. Like if it's like this, you need to do this right away. This is the best play. This is going to be this. Like I find the people that push you to action typically are inherently selfish, but people that push you to knowledge usually are typically altruistic. So if you have somebody that you're watching that's pushing you to buy, you need to do this, you need to do that. Like any person that believes in their product, they don't sell it. They simply inform you on it because they believe in it. The selling is in the informing, not in the pushing. So I think if you have a new, contact that you don't understand about, like how pushed do you feel? How much do you need to act right this second? How much do you really understand about the protocol? Because somebody who's truly great will just teach you. And through that teaching, you'll create conviction, and that conviction that's what happened with me at Bitcoin. Nobody told me to buy Bitcoin. But when I built out a custom GPT to help me understand blockchain, I started getting granular with the details. I realized, I was like, I got to get in on this. This is the best buy of the next 50 to 250 years.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, I really like that, Charles. One thing I'll say is I have studied social media since I was like 10. I've wanted to be a YouTuber. I've been making videos on YouTube since 2008 or in 2009. You can track back my YouTube, my main one actually. And I've just been very interested in how people navigate the industries and are able to remain relevant, and then very curious on why I've maintained somewhat of a keeping up with various people on social media since I was like 15. I'm like, why do I still remember this person and still feel a need to check in every now and then to see what they're up to? And every now and then, some of them will blow my mind as far as like how they're able to navigate and surf the waves. And for what I'll say is I agree with you. I'm not so much of a sensationalist. I don't really I'm not personally drawn towards that, which gives me the indication that others maybe aren't as well. I've also been able to build platforms, not in this industry, unfortunately, that went way bigger than like as far as Instagram and TikTok, these other platforms. Been able to grow massively bigger on other industries than crypto. I don't know what it is. People just don't like crypto on Instagram, or maybe I'm just terrible at making the content, but I've never made sensational content and I've been able to do well. So I'm like, okay, there is an audience for content that's like drummed down a little bit. Like someone I think of is like Alex Hormozy, on someone who's got serious game and pushes you towards knowledge and just isn't sensational in that way. He just drops game and you're like, yeah, that guy's real. He just gets it. Alex Becker is someone who gives similar vibes. He's also a bit more sensational, but I think it's just for the fun of it.
I was gonna say,
but like
Alex Becker's crazy.
He's also just relaxed. Like he's like a billionaire, so he's just sitting around, like, can do whatever he wants. But for the most part, like his value comes from the game he drops. He just drops value bombs after value bomb. And there are people that I follow in this space, and this might just be something you pick up after staying up to date with people and kind of observing how people go and trying to identify whether or not they're altruistic or not. And you'll find that you can trust certain types of people because you can start to get a bit of a gut feeling around them. And then for me, I really value consistency and people who can stick with the game. There are content creators that I started in crypto land with in 2021 that are still here, still putting in work, that I remember from like week one that I saw, and they're putting in just as much work as I am. I find respect there. And something that Alex Hormozi said on a podcast, which rang true, he was like, respect is the universal, is like, what did he say? He said, respect is like the universal way that you're graded on almost. Like there's no way for someone to look at your sorry, I completely botched that. Hard work is the universal language of respect. Basically, if someone sees you putting in really hard work and it's true, there's no way to not respect that, even someone 25 levels above you. And so I really like that because I've always been that guy who's like never made it, but like just enough to like climb to the next ladder and continue growing. And I see other people doing it that way and they're finding success. And I value that because that's long term. And that shows you actually do care about that thing and you're passionate about it.
Yeah, I've tweeted many times before the idea that and there's always exceptions to this, of course, exceptions to everything. There's nuance, even though it doesn't seem like there is if you hop on Twitter. But generally speaking, it's very rare to get hate from above. You're almost always going to get the hate from below, from people who are doing worse than you. People who are doing better than you generally also want you to win if they're actually in for legitimate reasons and stuff like that. And I think, yeah, more often than not, you're going to find that those people who are legit have actually put in the hard work, done the right things, smart and savvy in this space. They don't. Why would what advantage does it give them that you fail or you do poorly or something like this? They want you to win, and then hopefully you can gravitate towards some of those people and glean some nice lessons and stuff. That's certainly how I've navigated this space.
Have you ever?
Oh, please.
I was going to ask you, Andy. Have you ever had a hater? What did they say?
Well, as someone who has been on YouTube for 4 years now, yes, I can tell you in droves.
What was the craziest thing that you were like, why would they say that?
Oh, I mean, there's like every conspiracy.
Is it really like that? No way.
You work for this project. You're selling your stuff every time you put out good news just to sell immediately. They pay you to do this to like crazy stuff. I mean, everything, being called scammer because they bought something that happened to go down. Welcome to crypto. I mean, every kind of thing, being called all kinds of awful things, every insult. Every once in a while, it still irks me a little bit, but generally I'm sure pretty tough skinned with this at this stage. But yeah, it's like you get a lot of that as you go from a bull market into a bear market because it's painful. And people who, it's their first time making that transition. If you didn't exit and you're just holding your bags on the way down, well, you get angry and you want to find people to blame. And you just pick anybody who's public and in the crosshairs that you maybe just even read one tweet from, watched one video from. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, Cade, you've been on YouTube for a while. You've just people in the comments. They don't know you.
I've been on a mission since I was in middle school to not be cringy. I was so unpopular in school that being cringy was probably the worst thing that you could ever ask for because I was around beautiful human beings. Everyone at the school was beautiful. I went to a school that my dad worked at, so it was a private school, and I went there for the first 9 years of my life. Everyone was literally 10 out of 10. Everything you could ask for, these kids had, and I was like, dude, cringe is how you just get wrecked in this game. So like, I cannot be cringy. So as I got older, that helped me. Ended up being good later in life because I don't know if that's cringy, maybe not the right word. But like the idea of
cringy,
like okay, for this exact example, the idea of commenting and blaming someone else for your bags going down is so painfully cringy in my head that I could never allow myself to comment that for the fear that someone else would call me out and be like, I can't believe you commented this 3 years ago. What kind of nerd are you to comment and blame someone else? Like, that's what I mean. Like, that is some serious loser energy. I'm not trying to act more like a loser, but I'm already a loser was kind of how I was thinking in middle school and high school because it was a battle, bro. It was a battle every single day to just stay alive in the game,
Somebody's sitting at home and thinking of the comment that they wrote to somebody on how they said it went down, and they're like, "Man, that's serious loser energy, I guess."
It is, dude. You gotta level up. Like that cannot be you. If you're commenting stuff and you're blaming other people for your issues, that is not gonna get you anywhere, dude. Like they're not even gonna read your comment first off, especially someone like Andy who's getting thousands of views every single day. Like he's seeing some of the comments, but he's not sitting there like harping on like, oh man, dude, crypto user 4277 ZZZX said I suck, dude. It's over. Like that's definitely not happening.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. It's like I feel like, it's a tough, harsh truth. And, if you actually are open to change and open to growth as a person, then you'll hear stuff like that, what Cade just said, and you'll internalize it and go, is that me? Because the reality is, if you are an adult, you should be able to take responsibility for your own actions and not lash out like a child, when something doesn't quite go your way. And that's just, you either learn that or you don't. You either go through life figuring that out or you don't. And I'm sure we can probably all agree we don't really have time for the people who can't figure that type of stuff out. Just don't have the emotional intelligence to, figure it out. Thankfully, the majority of, the vast majority of people I encounter through my YouTube channel and stuff do not fit that bill. We're all laughing right now.
You see Charles like laugh. Dude. Oh man.
Anyway, the vast majority of people I have found though do not fit that description. Most people are great. Most people are there on the journey with you. They're just trying to learn and figure this stuff out. But there are exceptions, of course, as with all things in life.
Yeah, definitely.
So I want to circle back to the world of Bitcoin. We've already explored, I've got kind of your general thoughts on Bitcoin, but I want to contextualize some of those thoughts a little bit. I'm really curious, like for, the masses out there, what is something that most people don't understand about Bitcoin, that like so many of the people that you talk to, like in these spaces deeply understand? That they just get, that seems like, a no-brainer to them, but most people miss, that you think is like fundamentally important for people out there who are kind of on the cusp of education and understanding to get?
Yeah. No, I'll take this one just because kind of reminds me of something I've seen recently on Twitter. So there's a guy called Bram Cranstenstein. Bram sounds like it's
Brian
not.
Krasenstein.
Is it? I don't
I
know.
think so.
It's really interesting because he puts out this tweet, and I'm like, man, this is a really crazy idea, which is how many people actually understand Bitcoin and what has been done and what is going to be done. And I was like, I think I replied with a tweet. I was like, well, 14,000 people have watched Robert Breedlove's first episode of his podcast where he goes over like how Bitcoin is like discovering the number zero. It's a discovery as opposed to an invention. And I think if you understand that and you understand like why did Satoshi disappear? If you go way deep into like why the whys of this thing having been created, like less than 100,000 people, maybe even less than like 25,000 people really understand Bitcoin and what has been done. And what I mean by that is like, if you like the masses really just look at it as like, oh, this is some sort of like a gamble, some sort of a speculation. But I think that what they don't realize, especially in the Western world, is your property rights are not as enshrined in the social contract as what you think they are otherwise would have been. So when you look at something like Bitcoin, it's a radical issuance of property rights because no one can really harm the centralized network or the part of the network that's in the center, which is the block, because it's defended by like a network of, as Saylor puts, cyber hornets. And then if you understand that you own the keys to your Bitcoin, and you really go deep into that, you're like, this is a radical form of property rights that nobody can take away from me. And I think that once the masses understand that, they're like, wait, do I really own my house? Those stocks in the stock market, do I really own those stocks if I was to do something that was otherwise not deemed okay or something else? Is it all real? Like that's what you start to question. And you're like, well, my Bitcoin's real. So that's what I'd say. That's the best to understand.
Force is no longer a way to retrieve assets when self-custody comes into play. It's so interesting because before, force was, totally on the table for thousands of years. You hold gold in the safe, it's no longer on the table. Anyway, sorry. You're going to say something, Andy?
Oh, I was just going to, agree with that and just say one of the most fundamental things about Bitcoin that's always seemed like the most powerful aspect of it to me. I mean, there's a litany of things that I think are impressive and first of its kind and game changing and what have you. But the ability, again, this is a very Western thing to not truly understand, but other countries, this makes way more sense. But the ability to put all the money you have, all of your wealth into Bitcoin, and then physically walk across borders and not having any physical belongings whatsoever, and just remembering 12 or 24 words, depending on what type of seed phrase you're rocking, and you can take all your wealth with you. That can't be confiscated. I mean, obviously, there's the exceptions, like you could be tortured or whatever. Yeah, that aside, physically confiscated though from you, you can't. And this is the first time in the history of the world that's ever been possible with your wealth. And I think that fundamentally is incredibly powerful, incredibly interesting. And that alone, everybody should be like, well, shit, this thing, maybe this thing is actually important and powerful. And maybe I should pay attention to it. But Charles, yes, please.
I think so. For me, to be honest, I have not met a single person that understands Bitcoin to like the really deep level. And I don't get into the code, but understanding like concatenation and nonce, and even something that really like racked my brain for a while was, if the terahash is that high, but we can only have like 4.2 billion opportunities to go through the nonce, like, aren't we going to run out of probability to be able to run through the nonce to find all those zeros over and over again? Well, when it restarts, it changes the timestamp and then it changes the header. So what ends up happening is it goes 4.2 billion variations of the nonce, and then after it rolls over, changes the timestamp again, and then does it again. Well, and that's how you can have like infinite variations looking for all those zeros. So I think the aha moment for me, and if people could understand this, is the idea that Bitcoin is so powerful, not because the tech, but because the hash is so high. And the compute and the physical power that is behind Bitcoin is the thing that makes it like absolutely intrinsically valuable, not the technology itself. Bitcoin is useless without all the hash power, because the hash power makes it anti-state, makes it anti-government, makes it anti-individual parties, makes it anti-hacker, all that stuff. The reason why is because of this little tiny secret thing where every 2048 blocks, it recalculates the time in which a block should be achieved. So if it goes under 10 minutes, the algorithm will add a 0 to the nonce. Every time it adds a 0, it changes the probability increase by 2 to the 23rd power. So every time you do that, it infinitely makes it way harder to find the nonce. And obviously, like, this is already quite detailed. And if you don't know what the nonce is, it's going to be really hard to attach to. But basically, think about it. If you had to do calculations on your calculator and say 1 + 1, and you had to get to 5,236,000, how long would it take if you had to go digit by digit to find that digit instead of going directly to it? And so we're basically using mathematical probability to find very hard numbers to find by racking through, a bunch of different multiples. So I say that all to say, that part is when I understood the nonce and understood probability. I was like, this isn't going to be broken by any government. And the bigger it gets and the more people that become on board, the safer it gets. And I realized, barring World War III, this is the next asset for 300 years. Like, the US can go down, Russia can go down, all of these nations can go down, and the individual miners. And the thing that's crazy is the mining time, if they all go down, will get way slower, but the probability will just rehash. It'll take all the zeros out, and then it instantly resets. And now the network is according to 50% of the miners in 2048 blocks. So it's like first world nations got cut out because of nuclear war. Doesn't matter. Still use Bitcoin.
Yeah, the fact that it's one of, if not the most powerful compute forces on the planet currently is fairly astounding. The way the actually blocks are solved is pretty amazing, and a lot based on a lot of what you just said and some other pieces of the technology itself. Thought to maybe even theoretically, we won't know until we're actually there. Thought to be already quantum resistant as is, which is pretty fascinating. So a real quick call. Given the well, one, the probability of solving blocks and how it's constantly changing, but two, the SHA-256 encryption. Just the level of encryption is already too great with kind of an ever-moving target to be I mean, again, this is a little bit over my head. This is just from my rough understanding of it, but that is some of what goes into, again, theory, because we don't have any sustained quantum compute at this point. We might not for the next 2 decades. It's a pipe dream at this point. But that is some of the thought and theory, and maybe someone else here knows better than I do because I'm not an expert on this, of why it actually has some potential quantum resistance right now.
I think I'm not an expert either, but I think that one way we could think about it is, and this has been talked about by specifically on our show, D++ and Adrian Morris, who both are bespoken, I mean, and they have tons of credentials to back it up, but bespoken understanding of quantum computing. And the one way I guess you could think about it is if they do have quantum computers that can, break all this encryption, at what point along like the point of breaking things is there going to be the banking system and then like the internet and then the other things, and then where's Bitcoin at? So if Bitcoin's way out here, then I guess like you said, everything's already gone, everything's not secure. Bitcoin's just okay for a long while. And I mean, this is all theoretical. Maybe, I don't know. But
I mean, let's say quantum computers come out in a way that's actually you can have sustained quantum compute in the next couple of years. This, regardless of whether Bitcoin is already quantum resistant or not, whenever people bring up quantum compute as an argument against Bitcoin, I just go, who cares? Like nuclear codes, electrical grids, the banking systems, these are all the things that are going to fail first. And then who cares about Bitcoin if we have nuclear fallout because quantum compute cracked the encryption of our militaries around the world? So it's a little bit of a moot point. But my big point was just that it's fairly fascinating technology and there's a lot to it. And I don't even understand all of it myself. But I wanted to ask Charles as a follow-up to that. If someone's listening to some of this and they're like, "Ooh, I want to dig into the deep levels like that," what is there any resource or thing that you would point them to dig that you originally used?
To be honest, like the only thing, I just built a custom chat GPT that teaches according to your modality. So it asks you 10 questions.
I use it every day.
It asks you 10 questions. What's your background? What's your previous education in? What's your education level? How do you like to learn in detailed or short formats? And then whenever you ask it questions, it spits out answers according to exactly how you like to learn. And that's the only way I understood Bitcoin. I tried for long periods of time, but until you really start to get like a tool that teaches you according to you, it's a little hard. So I guess
Is there a quick resource or something for somebody who wanted to build a GPT of their own that you could point them towards to do this, to dump in the white paper and other resources and ask it questions?
No. Can I just put the link like somewhere for them?
Yeah,
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
in the description.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but
it's just a little tough. Like I loaded it with all of the GitHub repositories, so it has all the code. It has everything that you'd need to kind of learn. They're happy to. All you need to do is like understand like modality training for LLMs and then, intaking who the person is. And then using that as like, how you're going to rag all your stuff. So it's just, it'd be a little hard to explain.
And then, Cade, was there any thoughts you had on, I mean, maybe not the quantum aspect of it, but the topic before that?
Yeah, I think when I was trying to understand Bitcoin, the thing that got me to actually buy in was when I told the story before, but my friend Monza had called me and he was at a political convention. He was asking me, he's like, "Hey, how would you shield? You do a lot of content with Near Protocol. How would you shield Near or any other crypto to a politician?" And I was like, I don't know if I would actually. And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "I don't know if I'd feel comfortable shilling any politician anything other than Bitcoin. It's the only one that could make sense." And that helps me sort of click with the idea that one of the main things. And it was right after Gabriel texted me, asking me about my thoughts on proof of work. He was like, "Oh, great. Like you're into Bitcoin. You're like, what do you think of proof of work?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like it's cool, I guess, like whatever." But I think that was the disconnect, is like, that's one of the main reasons Bitcoin is so different, is because you can't spoof it out of thin air like you can with the US dollar. You can't just print more. You can't create you can create it, but like with the originally actual Bitcoin, you can make these other tokens on Bitcoin. But you can't just spin up Bitcoin. You actually have to grind. You have to pull an Andy here, buy a bunch of miners and actually mine this stuff. And it's difficult and it costs money and energy. That's the main reason. It's capped. and you can't spin it out of thin air. You actually have to grind for it pretty hard. And I think that was something that most crypto people are aware of in the background, but don't really give it enough thought because they're not really deeply thinking about it. I was starting to think about it because we were in all these spaces. We had Simon Dixon in this space. We have you in this space. We have Fred Krueger in this spaces. And I was like, okay, why do we have these like gigabrains, serious gigabrains? Not only gigabrains, they're loaded. These guys have money. And why are they dumping in enormous amounts of their net worth into this token? Like, I get it. Like, if you're trying to make money, if you're a crypto, ecom guy who's 27 years old, you're like, oh, I'll put $75 million into Ethereum and Solana because it's going to pump. I understand that. But when they were like, no, I'm just Bitcoin, I was like, okay, what am I missing? Because this doesn't make any sense. I need to really understand because there's some serious conviction here that I'm missing. It's not just for number go up. There's something else here that's below the surface or giving them conviction. Way smarter people than I am with a lot more money. I got to get to the bottom of this fast because I don't want this thing to go to $1 million before I figure it out. And I've got way too many people around me who can tell me these answers. And so it's been a blessing hopping in these spaces with all of you guys and been able to literally just sponge up the information. And so now I'm at a point where I've begun to dabble into the Bitcoin arena with my money instead of just my mouth. So,
yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting too about Bitcoin is there's no coin, like doesn't exist. And this is a part that kind of trips me out. Like there's no token, that none of that exists. It is a ledger. It is literally just like the idea of a piece of paper, and Gabriel has 250 by his name, and Charles has this by his name. And when you transfer tokens, it literally is just a data set switch. There's no coin or token anywhere. But I feel like for the longest time, I attached to the idea that there is it. Like I own tokens in my wallet. Like I own no tokens. It's an artificial attribution to my name and my wallet address. So, which is interesting, which is the same as the Fed banking system. If you understand FedMaster and all this stuff, like banks don't transfer money to each other. They never send cash. They're not like, hey, I need 25,000 quick through the mail system, USPS. And that doesn't happen. You have to have a Fed Master account. And then from that Fed Master account, they will actually request a transfer. And it's just a ledger switch, which is if you go back on money back, if you got, actually, this is a really good resource. Lynn Alden's video, Broken Money. Is it Broken Money? I think it is. Dude, the book is pretty wordy. It's great. I got about halfway through. But what I will say, she has a highly condensed, very visual version that's 33 minutes on YouTube. And it is amazing. Sorry, for people like me. Like I tried to, when I was really getting into the Bitcoin thing and I was really studying, I was listening to the Bitcoin Standard. Yeah, Bitcoin Standard late at night. This was actually messing me up. I was listening to it right before I'd sleep, and I'd fall asleep listening to the Bitcoin Standard, and I'd wake up with really weird dreams. I mean, like strange. Like I was like, I know Bitcoin's good, but this is bad for me. So no, I say that all to say, I think it is interesting once you understand the traditional finance system, people want to be attached to the idea that they own the physical asset. And I understand that. But the truth is you put your money in the bank and it's the same ledger that you use, because when you're talking about transferring wealth, physically transporting it is very slow. All they do is a ledger thing from one to another. And then if you want to withdraw, you can. So the only difference here is the withdrawing. So anyway.
Yes, I agree. Money is a artifact of the brain. It's just what two people assign value to in an agreement. And people talk about, oh, but it's not, Bitcoin's not real. Well, 90-something% of all US dollars are just numbers on a screen, and that's the end of it. And the worst part is, Bitcoin's numbers on a screen, dollars are numbers on a screen. One of those two things is not like the other, because that number can go up by huge amounts, $1 trillion every 300 days or whatever it is right now. And the other one cannot, which is probably one of the big reasons why we're all here. So we're here at the very end of the podcast, but I do want to end with an outlook. Again, you talk to so many people, you hear probably a million opinions about what does 2025 look like? When does the bull run start? So I'm curious, after hearing all this, after sifting it through your own brains and deciding for yourselves, what do you think is actually when does the bull run start? What does this next cycle kind of look like? Walk me through that.
Yeah, I can go off of that. I mean, I try not to make predictions very much at all. Just buy as much Bitcoin as you can and then learn more about it and then understand self-custody and all that. But what I will say is looking at the macro trends of what's going on, we have an election. So that's going to be a large event. We don't know who's going to be elected and we don't know what they're going to do, but we can guess based on one side or the other. Still, there's some minutia there. It's kind of confusing what some people will do, but and then I would just take a look at, the adoption in terms of who's going to be coming to buy. So, I think a really interesting person who spoke at the Bitcoin conference was like Cantor Fitzgerald, who was speaking in regards to building lending products against Bitcoin. So these are the kinds of people that I like to research. Like I would go back and look at all of the speeches at the past Bitcoin conference, and that'll definitely give you the best guidance as to what's going to happen over the next year. So because those are going to be the big change makers most likely, and then keep up to date with all that information.
Yeah. I buy Bitcoin because I have a catastrophic outlook. I don't think Western civilization lasts, which is like kind of a sad, scary. I try not to repeat this too much because people kind of get a little jumpy. They get a little bit like, oh man, I like it the way I like it. But I'm ready to pivot. Like, I'm okay if everything falls apart. I'm prepared for that scenario. And I don't really, I do. No nation has ever lasted forever. I love the nation I'm in. I really, really do. I'm so blessed to be American, and I have luxuries that other people have never enjoyed for generations. But I don't think everything lasts forever. And so, yeah, I have a little bit of a sad. I'm not a doomsday prepper. I don't prep for anything. I don't have any of that type of stuff. But I do have like 100-year outlook that Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if I have price action. Like I'll will it to my kids, and they can take over.
Yeah, life has progressively gotten step by step, 2 steps, 3 steps faster as far as moving towards a dystopian future. I don't know if we're doing it to ourselves by creating too many movies. Like I'm seeing in the movie theaters, more and more horror movies coming out. Like I feel like humans are naturally drawn to this chaos, and we're seeing a bit more. And it's almost like a bad habit. It just feels good. Like you eat one French fry and you're like, oh, I should not. But let me get one more. And we just keep reaching our hand into the bag and just eating another French fry, like how it is when you buy someone else French fries, you're on the way home and you're just taking, extra fries out of their bag and then filling up your own stomach and then giving them the less full one.
You miss the fry bag, accidentally grab their thigh. You stare at each other awkwardly for a second.
Or sparks fly, if it's not awkward.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That went in an entirely different direction. I wasn't thinking about that at all. That's hilarious. But as far as the direction of crypto, I do tend to think, well, life will probably look dystopian when we zoom out in the same way that I'd seen a video of 2020, the COVID, all those things. I don't even remember what happened really, but like there was this video that came out and it was like a movie of 2020. And it was super creepy watching it. And I was like, yeah, it was creepy, I guess, a little bit during the time of 2020, but it was kind of just life. And so I imagine we'll get to a point where it's pretty dystopian comparatively, but it'll just be kind of what's going on. And it'll be really, really important to see who's your circle, who you're around. Are you around people who, like one thing that happened to me at Wolf that is pretty much directly because I work, with Charles very, very closely, especially in the beginning, was like, okay, instead of thinking, oh, this happened, now what, is like, okay, this happened, now what, but differently, like now what do we do about it kind of thing. Like we can't do something about it. If a space isn't growing and it should be, like what do we do to make it grow anyway, in spite of all the circumstances? So I imagine like whoever you're around will be super important in a very dystopian world where, if we're in a situation where, it matters that you've got Bitcoin on a ledger and it's not, and it's self-custodial, it's like on your cold wallet. Like if that situation where we're at a point where that really matters because they're taking your money, they're locking down, CBDCs are around and it's really creepy. You got to have that. I tend to think we'll probably lean that way. But as far as the crypto market, like the next year or two, I don't think it'll be like that. But as far as the 2025 market, I'm also of the boat of let's stack as much Bitcoin as we can in whatever way that is. Because I'm a content creator and I'm beholden to the market and I talk about the market and we have a lot of spaces. I feel like I have no choice but to throw in a certain percentage of my money into the altcoins, meme coins, and NFTs just to play around in the mud with everybody and have something to talk about. So I'll be in that boat a little bit, and anything I make there will pretty much go into buying Bitcoin on drops, and that's kind of the goal there. And I think that's a pretty decent thing. And I'm trying to remain diversified. It's difficult because I'm also of the idea that maybe the US dollar doesn't do so well. So I'm a little bit on the fence. I'm going to be I'm going to be paying attention very closely within the next couple of years. So I'm 26. I feel like the next few years are going to be pretty pivotal for just about anyone, but especially in our position, we're in our, 20s, 30s, 40s. Like you're still life expectancy is just getting bigger and bigger. We're living, older and older. So I don't know, man. I feel like it matters that you pay attention and you're intentional about your thoughts and figuring out life, taking it a bit more seriously.
Yeah, roll around in the mud with us pigs for a little while. I like it.
That's what I thought too. I was like, wow. He's like, I'll get into the mire. I'll get my snout dirty.
That was okay. Very interesting takes. I was not expecting those. I like it. Very cool. So,
what's your take? Do you have a positive or a dystopian future?
I mean, far out, sure, I can see a lot of those outcomes. I think we have probably a much longer ways away from that than most people would assume. The ability for the U.S. to kick the can down the road, as one of the premier superpowers on this planet as of right now, is pretty unparalleled. We can do a lot of things to keep this Ponzi scheme of fiat and stuff and the economy going for quite a long time. Do I think it should implode at some point? Yeah, so we can get back to something that is more sustainable. Yes, but what I hear from politicians is, I don't care. I don't think it matters who wins this election. I think either option is going to be money printing like crazy. I think that is just going to be a continuation trend until there's some major break or something like that. But I just don't see that in the near term. Long term, sure. Yeah, Bitcoin is definitely a part of my thesis for economic meltdown and not having, exposure to assets that I think will be greatly affected by that. And hopefully at that point, Bitcoin is big enough to be somewhat non-correlated to all that. But at this stage, if all that were to happen, Bitcoin's going down the shitter with everything else. It's a highly correlated asset at this stage. It's so tiny. But eventually, yeah, I think, I align with some of those views, just maybe different timelines and stuff.
The title's going to be like Wolf Financial Team is super dystopian, doomsday preppers, like in all caps or something like that.
I feel like this was mostly a positive outlook overall on the thing. But yeah, there's certain realities we can't deny and we have to be really careful about. And I feel like maybe people aren't being so careful about it, and we might become realities, hopefully just not sooner than we think. But either way, this was super insightful. I hope that people, I think there's a lot of things in here that are really good takeaways. And I think there's hopefully some things in here that get you to think a little bit and then go explore those topics on your own. And there's a bunch of stuff we didn't even get to that I would love to get to maybe some other time. But this was a pleasure. It was lovely to see all three of you again. It's nice to meet you in Nashville at Bitcoin. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for hosting us, Andy.
Yes, sir. Look at that. Look at those fireworks.
I didn't mean
to love that we get fireworks at the end.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Andy. This was great, man. Great conversation.
And to those of you listening in, thank you for listening to another episode. See you in the next one.